This conference will now be recorded.
Yesterday, we were discussing about what is a replication controller and what is a replica set and what is daemon set. So today, we'll try to understand about what is deployment in Kubernetes. So we'll try to understand what is deployment in Kubernetes. As we discussed already, in Kubernetes, deployment is the recommended way to deploy the application. In Kubernetes, deployment is the recommended way to deploy the application because of the some advantages, some features. If I am using replica set or replication controller, can we update our pod templates? I mean to say, can we redeploy our applications without deleting and recreating? No. So when it comes to deployment, we can deploy the applications and also we can update the deployments. We can create the deployments and also we can update the deployments. So basically we are creating a deployment, but a deployment will internally create a replica set only. We are going to create a deployment, but deployment will internally create a replica set and replica set will create the pods. And also if we are using deployment, if something goes wrong with the latest version, latest deployment, if something goes wrong with the latest version, I mean to say latest deployment, we can roll back. We can roll back to the older versions of the deployment. We can roll back to the older versions of the deployment. If something is not working with your latest image, latest deployment, you can roll back to the previous versions of the deployment. Deployment also we can scale up, scale down, right? Now, let's try to understand how to create a deployment object. So we have API version, again, kind, metadata, and spec. API version, kind, metadata, and spec. So what is kind? No, what kind of object we want to create now? Kind is replica set. What kind of object we want to create now? We already discussed what is replica set, right? Now what we are trying to discuss about deployment, not the replica set. What kind of object we want to create? We want to create a deployment. What is the API version for deployment? apps slash v1 metadata name. This name is for what? Name of a deployment. Name of a deployment. Then here we can give namespace. Under which namespace we want to create, and also we can give a labels. These labels are for what again? These labels for a deployment. Okay. But this we will not use as a selectors. This we will not use as a selectors anywhere. But we can give a labels for a deployment. And again, under spec, we have a replicas. So what is this? Number of pod replicas. How many pods you need? Again, here you have a selector. So here we are creating a deployment. Deployment will internally create a replica set. Okay. So selector here again we have to use either match labels or match expressions. Okay. So here match labels, key and value. So what labels we are giving as a selectors here? These labels are of what? What labels we are giving here as a selector? Basically your pod labels. So how can I define my pod information? How can we define pod information? Using template. Using template, we can define. Under template, we have a metadata and again spec. This metadata is basically pod metadata name of pod, labels, your pod labels, key and value. Under spec what we have? We have containers, name of the container, image name, ports, your container port, something like this. Something like this, excuse me. Now we can create a deployment something like this. But before creating a deployment, right, let's understand there is a concept called deployment strategies. Deployment strategies in Kubernetes. We have some deployment strategies in Kubernetes. We have recreate deployment strategy and rolling update deployment strategy. Kubernetes has a deployment strategies, recreate and rolling update. So we can mention the deployment strategy. What is this deployment strategy all about? Suppose I created a deployment. First, I created a deployment. So let's take this cluster. You have a Kubernetes cluster. Let's consider this is your Kubernetes cluster. So you created a deployment. You applied, basically you created some deployment. So you created a deployment. For the first time you are creating a deployment. So what does happen in the background? Request goes to API server. The API server will process that request. The scheduler will schedule your pods. The scheduler will schedule your pods. For the first time, it will create directly whatever pods, how many pods it has to be created, it will create. So it will create the pods. It has created pods. For the first time, it will create the pods if that doesn't exist. Maybe if you have two pods, it has created two pods. Now let's assume you created this one with image one. I mean to say something like this. This is your image. Just I'm giving version 1 image, whatever repo, registry, something like this. So using this image, the container, the pod is created for the first time. You created a deployment created a pods. Now let's assume you are updating your deployment. What does it mean? What does it mean when you are updating a deployment? What does it mean? Basically, let's assume the developer modifies the code. In the background, developer updated the code. Developer modified some code, some piece of logic he has updated. Now, do we need to deploy that latest code in our Kubernetes cluster? I mean to say the latest image needs to be deployed, right? So developer modifies the code, maybe automation, your Jenkins server, your pipeline. The Jenkins pipeline has triggered the build. So the Jenkins pipeline has triggered the build. It has cloned the project. It has created a package and it has built the latest image. It has built the image. Then it has pushed the image to the repository, that latest image. I mean to say with the other version. It has pushed the image. Now, maybe from the Jenkins pipeline itself, can I apply that YML? Suppose in my Jenkins, if I have configured, suppose in my Jenkins, I have configured kubectl. I have installed kubectl in my Jenkins server. And if I have a kube config file configured, can I execute kubectl commands from my pipeline? So that can I execute my kubectl commands from the pipeline? Something like this. Now, if I want to execute, I'm using manifest. Do I need to maintain manifests also, Kubernetes manifest also along as a source code in version control system? That Kubernetes manifests also, do I need to maintain in the version control system? Right? So I have a manifest. In my manifest file, I updated the tag that whatever image, latest image I pushed in the manifest file, before applying, I modified the tag, what version, latest version. Now, already this version is deployed. So now I have version 2 image, right? Now when I execute this apply, what needs to be happen in the Kubernetes? Do I need to have a latest pods? I mean to say, this pod needs to be gone. And do I need to get a latest pods with version 2 image? Because there is a change in your code. You need to redeploy your application, right? So when we are updating the deployment, already I have a old version of the pods running for the deployment. Now when I am updating the deployment, we have some deployment strategies. When we are updating the deployment. One is recreate, another one is rolling update. So what is recreate? Right? So I already have some pods. I created a deployment. I have some pods. When I am updating my deployment, what it does, right? First, it will delete the existing pods, the old version of your pods. It will delete the existing pods, old version of the pods. At the same time, it will delete all the pods. Then it will recreate the pods with the latest changes, latest images. It will recreate your container pods with the latest image at the same time. But in this case, if my deployment strategy is recreate, will I have a downtime? I mean to say, when I am updating my deployment, all the old pods will be deleted. Then it will create the new pods. So if someone is accessing in this phase or in this phase, is application works? So if my deployment strategy is recreate, will I have a downtime when I am updating my deployments, when I am rolling back my deployments? Yes. So in this type of deployment strategy, all of the old pods are killed at once. All of the old pods are deleted at once, and it will get replaced with new pods. This is recreate deployment strategy. And we have one more strategy called rolling update. We have one more deployment strategy called rolling update. In case of rolling update, it works slowly. If you observe this diagram, if you observe this diagram, right? I have a old version of the pods. When I am updating my deployment, what is happening? First, it is creating one latest pod, one latest, with that changes, it is going to create one pod, new pod. Once this pod is ready, one pod is ready, it is going to terminate one old pod, one old pod. So if this is happening in this stage, still we have a old pods. In that case, will our service will route the traffic to these pods when this phase is happening? The Kubernetes service, will it route the traffic to these old pods when this phase is happening, when it is creating a new pod? Yes. Once that new pod is completely ready, it will terminate one of the old pod. In that case, do we have still one old pod, one latest pod to serve the traffic in this phase? One old pod, one latest pod to serve the traffic in this phase? Yes. Then it will create a one more pod. Once this is also ready, then it will terminate this one, old one. It is going to do one by one. I mean to say slowly. You can mention whether you want to do one by one or more, but it will do slowly. In this case, do we have a downtime when I am using rolling deployment as a deployment strategy? Do we have a downtime? No, right? So the rolling deployment is the standard deployment of Kubernetes. It works slowly, one by one, replacing the parts of the previous version of your application with parts of the new version of application without any downtime. Rolling update, wait for new parts to become ready. Rolling update will wait new parts to become ready before it will start scaling down the old ones. So if there is any problem, the rolling update or a deployment will be aborted. It will be aborted without bringing the whole application down. Suppose there is a problem creating the latest pod. In that case, this is not coming up. This is not coming up. Is it going to continue the deployment or it will stop here itself? It will be aborted if there is a problem creating this pod. Is it going to terminate if this is not coming up? The latest pods are not coming into running state. Is it going to terminate old pods if it is not coming up? No. So these are the advantages. These are the advantages you have with the deployment and deployment strategies. Now, what is the default one? Suppose if I don't mention here my deployment strategy. Did I mention my deployment strategy anywhere in the manifest? I have not mentioned the deployment strategy. So in that case, what is the default deployment strategy? Interview question. What is the default deployment strategy? The default one is this one. This is the default strategy. So if I don't mention, this is the default strategy, rolling update. It is going to delete one after the other. It will not wait in between. So first let me demonstrate recreate. Let me demonstrate recreate, then we will discuss about rolling update. So in case of recreate, right, there is a one more attribute called strategy. This strategy is applicable for what, guys? Can I give this strategy if I am directly creating a replica set or replication controller? If I am directly creating a replica set replication controller, can I use these deployment strategies? No. This strategy is applicable only for the deployment objects. Okay. So strategy, type, recreate, something like this in case of recreate. Now let me connect to my Kubernetes cluster. And we will discuss that. So as of now, we deployed some applications. But this application is deployed as a replica set. This application is deployed as a replication controller. But will I able to update the latest changes? I mean to say, will I able to recreate these pods with the latest image if I want to redeploy? No. We need to delete and recreate. Instead of directly creating a replica set, if I create a deployment, we can update the deployment. Okay. So first let me delete whatever I have. Daemon set also you need to recreate. But daemon sets is basically kind of a agents, right? Your agents. Is your agent softwares will be keep on updating? I mean to say, is your agent softwares will every day you are going to modify the code? I mean to say, you are not going to work on the agent softwares, right? So agents softwares is some third-party images, third-party applications. But your applications, will you keep modifying your applications, your features, right? So the deployment we can use in that case. So now let me delete whatever I have. I'm executing this command kubectl delete all -all. It is going to delete all the objects. Whatever we have in the current namespace. You may have a question, sir, why you are deleting? Why can't you create a deployment? Because I already have a lot of pods. Is my, if I keep creating lot of objects, lot of pods in the cluster, if the cluster doesn't have enough CPU, if the cluster doesn't have enough memory, will my cluster works? Will my application work? Right? No. So this is very small cluster, 1 GB RAM, 1 GB RAM and 1 core processor. I have just 2 nodes. I can't have a lot of applications deployed in the cluster, so that's why I'm deleting to demonstrate. So now let me any application. Let me any application. So now I will modify this, right? So instead of replication controller or replica set, now what is the recommended one? I'm creating basically deployment. Your deployment name, whatever you want to give, replicas, all these things. Now the deployment strategy. So now I will demonstrate strategy, type, recreate. But this deployment strategy comes into picture when, if the deployment is not already there, we are just creating a deployment. In that case, will it use this strategy while creating a deployment? While creating a deployment, will it use this strategy? No. When it will use this strategy? So this strategy will be applicable only while updating. Siddharth is asking, sir, for deleting, we have prune command in Kubernetes similar to Docker. No, we don't have like a prune, kubectl prune, something like that. So we are going to delete the objects. How you are deleting? Kubectl, delete what object? Object or API or what type of object? And your object name. Object name. Suppose I want to delete a deployment. What you are doing? Kubectl delete deployment, your deployment name of the deployment which you want to delete. Suppose if I delete the deployment will internally create a replica sets and pods. Will that replica sets and pods also will be deleted? Whatever has been created by this deployment. Deployment will internally create a replica set, and the replica set will create the pods. If I delete the deployment, will it delete whatever replica set and pods has been created by this deployment object? Yes, it will delete. Guys, when you are deleting a replica set or replication controller, is it deleting the pods? Yes. Similarly, when you are deleting a deployment, whatever pods has been managed by this deployment, that parts will be deleted. Now, suppose I want to delete a service. You give service names. Or I want to delete, in Kubernetes we have a volumes, PVC, PV, persistent volumes, volume claims. You want to delete a claim, volume, you will give something like this. Suppose I want to delete a namespace, kubectl delete ns, that namespace name. So if I delete a namespace, whatever objects, I mean to say whatever deployments, whatever services, whatever daemon sets has been there in that namespace, everything will be deleted if I delete a namespace? Yes. Okay. If I want to delete, I don't want to delete namespace, but I want to delete objects. So when I say this one, what is going to happen? When I execute this one, kubectl delete all -all, it will delete all the objects in that namespace. Whatever current namespace, it will remove all the objects. When I executed that one, that's what happened. Okay. Now let's continue with this. So Pavani is asking, replica indicates how many servers are running. Oh my God, Today I am discussing deployment. Replica is asked, Pavani is asking what is replicas here. It's almost the 7th day. What is replicas here, guys? Is it representing number of servers in the cluster? Is it representing number of servers in the cluster? What is this replica? What are we creating using this one? What are we creating using this one? Pods. So using deployment or using replica set, we are creating a pods. So here, what this represents here, if I give 1, what will happen? If I give 2, what will happen? If I give 2, what is going to happen? I am going to get here how many pods? 2 pods. So this is replicas represents pods. How many pods for this template? Using this information, how many pods you want to create? So she is saying it is not related to Kubernetes. I have seen many projects, they were mentioning the number of instances. In Kubernetes, Pavani, in Kubernetes YMLs, you see, what is that YML? First of all, YML can be used for many. I can use YML for Docker Compose. I can use YML for Ansible. I can use YML for Kubernetes. Again, the cloud formation template. The cloud formation template also, we can use YMLs. So what is that cloud formation template? That is infrastructure as a code. But this one, does Kubernetes will manage your infrastructure? Can we create a servers using Kubernetes? Are we managing the servers and infrastructure using Kubernetes, or we are managing the containers using Kubernetes and Docker? Using Kubernetes or using Docker Swarm, we are managing only the containers, not the servers. So these replicas, whatever you see, it is nothing to do with your servers. In Docker Swarm also, in the compose file, what we have given, if you observe Docker compose file, what we have given, let me take the Docker compose YML, Docker compose YML. Here in the Docker compose, we are defining this way. Here also you see replicas as 2, but in this case, in the Docker, this replicas represents what? In the Docker Swarm, containers, number of containers. It is going to create a service. For this service, these many containers. But in Kubernetes, can we create a container directly? No. Kubernetes, what is the smallest one which we are deploying? Pod. So here, these replicas represent what? How many pods you want for this information with this data. So that's what we covered initially. Okay, now let me create this deployment. Now kubectl get deployment. Do I have any deployment in the current namespace? No. If you see, we don't have anything as of now in the namespace. Now let me apply. Guys, let me show something. What is happening when I am creating also. Here also I'll connect to same machine, just to show what is going to happen when I am creating a deployment in the background. Here also I'm connecting to the same. Let me watch. This is one Linux command, guys. Watch kubectl get pods. So every 2 seconds, that command, watch command, will be executing that kubectl get pods every 2 seconds. Now when I am applying this deployment, let's see what is happening. There is some issue. Required field selector. There might be a typo. Yeah, selector. Since we are creating a deployment will internally create a replica set. So we need to give a selector. Selector match labels, whatever your pod labels. Let me apply. Now you see, since I have given replicas as 2, do you see both pods got created for the deployment at the same time? While creating, right? It will not follow the deployment strategy. Now I have a deployment. You see, if you see here, we created a deployment. But a deployment internally created what? Who created this replica set? Did I created the replica set directly? No. Then who created this replica set? If you follow that, if you see the naming conventions, deployment name hyphen some unique alphanumeric character. So this deployment created a replica set. This is the first version of your deployment. Then this replica set created these pods. Now you see the naming conventions, deployment name, this replica set name, hyphen again, unique number. So deployment created a replica set is managing the pods. Now we can see the history of the deployment, how many times it has been updated. kubectl rollout history deployment and your deployment name. Now revisions, number of revisions for the deployment. How many revisions as of now? We just created. So how many revisions will be there for the deployment? How many revisions are there for the deployment? Only one revision. The change cause is basically you can capture the command. What command caused the change for this revision? Suppose let me delete and show. If I want to capture this change cause, I need to use one option called hyphen record. While applying any command, while executing any command, I need to use this hyphen record option so that that command will be displayed under the change cause. Let me show from the beginning. I am deleting because I want to capture the change cause also. I am deleting and again creating. Guys, if I am deleting a deployment, will it delete this replica set, these parts, whatever has been created? Yes. Now you see, it is deleting the parts also. I'm just watching the parts in the other side. So parts are getting terminated. Now if you see, I don't have anything. except the service, because I have not deleted the service, right? I just deleted the deployment. Service is still there. Now let me use this apply kubectl apply hyphen record equals to true. So when we are creating a deployment using this YML, I am creating a deployment. It will create the revision for the deployment. And I can see the change cause as this command. If I use this option, I can see the change cause as this command. Now you see deployment got created. Deployment got created. Now I have a deployment. Now I can see the revision. I mean to say history. kubectl rollout history deployment, your deployment name, whatever name you have given for a deployment. Wow, J is missing. Now do I see the change cause the revision? Because I deleted and I recreated. So how many revisions I have? How many revisions I have for this deployment? One. And do you see the change cause? What command or what is causing this revision? Which command created this revision? What is the root cause for this revision? Can I see that command here as a root cause? I mean to say change cause. Now I created a deployment. Deployment created a replica set created a pods. Now to access these pods, we have a service, right? Do you see a service? We created a service also here. Where is this one? Now this is my node port. From outside, if I want to access, I can use that node port. Guys, whenever there is a change in your images, do you need to delete and recreate the services? You are modifying your code. You need to delete and recreate the services, Kubernetes service. Not required. Only the pods has to be recreated. Now, let me access that application from outside. Let me access that. I'm able to access, right? Now let's assume the developer modified the code. The developer modified the code. The developer modified the code. He committed the code to GitHub. Let's consider you have a pipeline. You have a pipeline which will build and deploy the application into the Kubernetes. Now, the latest image. I want to deploy the different version of the image. So I already have an image. So I'm just showing only the deployment part. I'm explaining only Kubernetes part. So I already have another version. Maybe as of now, version 1 image is being deployed. Right? Guys, if you want to see that information also for this revision, right? For this revision, what is the pod template? Right? You can execute this command kubectl rollout history deployment. Same command deployment name hyphen revision 1 hyphen revision 1. So if you see, I executed this command with one option hyphen revision, that revision number I have given. Now can I see what is my part template for that revision? For that first revision, can I see my part template? I mean to say how many containers, what is the image is used for that revision. Can I see that information by executing this command? You see? So this is the revision template. Now I am updating my application. I am updating my application. Now I am doing it manually. Now let's consider there is a change in the code. I want to deploy different image. Maybe this image I want to deploy, a different image. Now I am giving image tag, which is already there in my registry. Guys, if that image doesn't exist in the registry, again, will your parts will come up? If this tag doesn't exist? No. So now I am updating this YML. I am updating this YML and I am applying this YML, which means I am updating the deployment now. Now I am going to update my deployment. Since I am using recreate as a deployment strategy, will my application will be up and running when I am updating my deployment? I am updating my deployment. You want to capture the root cause, you use hyphen record equals to true or record true. Now the old version of the parts are running. Now I am trying to update my deployment. What is my deployment strategy I am using in my manifest? Recreate. So you observe what is going to happen. Other side, you observe other side, this side, what is going to happen, and also you keep eye on the application also. Here I am trying to update hyphen record equals to true. Okay. Now you see, if you see other side, both parts are getting terminated, right? And is my application is up. Now application is down. And also you see both parts of the latest version is coming up at the same time, because I have given number of replicas as 2. So this time, by this time my application is up. But do I have a downtime when I am updating my deployment using recreate? Right? It will have a downtime. And also deployment will maintain the revisions. Since I have updated the deployment now, how many revisions will be there for this deployment? If I see the history of the deployment, only one revision. We created and we updated. So how many revisions will be there? Can I see 2 revisions? Revision 1 and revision 2. Which means it is maintaining the revision 1 information also. Which means it is maintaining the revision 1 information also. Now, if something is not working as expected with your latest image, if something is not working as expected with the latest image, can I roll back to the previous revision? Can I roll back my deployment? Yes, you can do that. If something is not working with your latest code, you can roll back. But before that, let me show something. kubectl get all. If you see why I have 2 deployments, two replica sets here for the deployment. One is having desired as 2, current as 2, ready as 2, and other has desired 0, current 0, ready 0. So this replica set is what? the old replica set. I mean to say old version, the revision one, this revision one replica set. This is what? Revision 2 replica set. It is maintaining the old revision, old version of your deployment. Now, if something goes wrong, I mean to say it is not working as expected, can I roll back my deployment without modifying any YML by executing kubectl commands? I can do something like this: kubectl rollout undo deployment, rollout undo deployment, your deployment name, something like this, guys. Here I have given, right? Rollout undo deployment, your deployment name, to which revision you want to roll back. Now, if I don't mention hyphen something like this, hyphen to revision, if I don't mention this revision, how many versions, I mean to say how many revisions it will go back? If I don't mention, just one version, one revision back it will go. Suppose I have multiple revisions, I have 3 revisions, can I directly go back to revision 1 by using this option? Suppose I have 3 revisions, 4 revisions, can I roll back to the directly the first revision? Yes, you can do using this option. I can say revision 1. So if I have a multiple, one more revision, if I say something like this, hyphen 2 revision 1, so which part template will be used? Whatever part template is created for this revision. So if I don't mention how many revisions it will go back, just one version back, one revision back to the current. So currently I am having 3 revisions. If I don't mention anything, it will go back to this revision. It will use this part template. Guys, where is where this all information is getting maintained? How many revisions are there? What are the part templates for that revision, for this deployment? Where is that information is being maintained? Kubernetes is maintaining that information. Where? etcd, that is Kubernetes data store. So now let me roll back. I am undoing my deployment, but again, while rollback also, since my deployment strategy is recreate, while rollback also, will my application will be up? I mean to say, when I roll back, since my deployment strategy is recreate, no. You see, so this is not applicable. It is not going to take this option or record true. So that's fine, leave it. Now you see, my application is again down. But if you see, is it recreating old parts? I mean to say, using that information, that part information, part template, is it going back to the previous parts? Is it recreating the parts with previous image, whatever image you used in the previous revision? We can roll back. So this is how we can manage the containers. And again, it will manage. If something goes wrong with this container, this pod, if something goes wrong with this pod, will the replication, that replica set will recreate the pod if that pod goes down? Yes. So this is how deployment works. This is how deployment works. Recreate. What is the one more deployment strategy we have? Rolling update. So let's see how that works. Let's see how that works. Rolling update. So let me delete this. I will create as a rolling update first. Okay, I'm deleting this deployment. So now if I delete this deployment, will it delete that complete revision information? I mean to say all the replica sets, all the parts, whatever has been managed by the deployment. Yes. Now let me demonstrate rolling update. Now my deployment strategy, I don't want to use recreate. I want to use rolling update. For this rolling update, you have some options. For this rolling update, you have some options. You see, rolling update, max surge, max unavailable, minimum ready seconds. There are some options here. So here, rolling update, that options, max unavailable, something like this. Max unavailable, max surge. So max unavailable. What is the meaning of max unavailable? When we are updating the deployments, how many parts can be unavailable? When we are updating the deployment, maximum how many parts cannot be unavailable? Suppose I have a 2 parts. When I am updating max, when I am updating the deployment using this deployment strategy, if I say max unavailable is 1, so how many parts will be still available when it is performing the deployment? If I have total 2 parts, if I say max unavailable 1, how many parts will be still available when I am going to do the deployment? 1, right? So that is what meaning of maximum unavailable when you are updating the deployment. Max surge, this represents how many parts needs to be created parallelly, right? So I am giving something like this. Suppose I have total 8 replicas. Can I give something like this? Max unavailable 2 or 4, something like this? Yes, right? That is based on your use case, your requirement. Now, this is what I am giving. What is this minimum ready seconds, min ready seconds? How many has to be created, that max search? Guys, you refer the document, you will get a more details. Okay, max Kubernetes official document, max search, max unavailable. The maximum number of pods that can be created over the desired number of the pods. How many new pods has to be created? When we are updating the deployment, it has to create the new pods, right? I mean to say new version. So maximum how many pods has to be created and how many has can be unavailable when it is performing. So that is what max search, max unavailable. You can give in the percentages also, guys. You can give in the percentages also, that max search, max unavailable, right? Here this is the deployment, right? You can see more information. Kubernetes official document. Guys, Kubernetes official document is very good. They have very good documentation. But you should have some time, some patience to read that document. It has very good documentation. So you can understand how to roll back, right? And also scale. If I want to scale the deployment, how can I scale, right? And also all that information. Now, what is this minimum ready seconds? Min ready seconds. Guys, if it is creating one new pod and if it is terminating one old pod, will your new pod will be immediately ready to serve your traffic? Will your container, will your application will come up immediately, or it will take some time to come up fully? It takes some time. So if I terminate one of the old pod before the latest pod is completely ready, will the will the request works? Will the traffic, will your application work if it is terminated the old pods before your new pods are completely ready? No, right? So I can mention the delay between the terminating the old pod. So here, if I say minimum ready seconds 60, so which means after how much time it will terminate the old pod? Once it is created the new pod, after how much time it will terminate the old pod? It will create a new pod and it will terminate the old pod after 60 seconds. So is it always 60, or can I give based on my application startup time? If my application, my container is taking 120 seconds to come up fully, I can give 120. Or if I give just 60, 60, you can give minimum ready seconds. So these are the options. If you remember, in Docker also, do you see these options? Update config, parallelism, delay, rolling update. I explained this one in the Docker also, if you remember, Docker Swarm. Similarly, in Kubernetes, deployment has that strategy, rolling update strategy. These are the options. Okay. So this minimum ready seconds should be sibling of strategy. This minimum ready seconds should be sibling of your strategy. So this is my deployment with rolling update. Now let me create a deployment first. I don't have anything. As I told guys, will this deployment strategy will be applicable while creating a deployment? Will it be applicable? No. Now you see record true. Now you see I am creating a deployment. Both parts will be coming up at the same time because I don't have anything. The deployment. What is this? kubectl. I have to use equals to. Now you see. Oh, is there any change in the latest version? Why I am getting only one? Or in my manifest, do I have only one? I'm not sure. Okay, that is the problem. In the manifest, I have only one replica. That is fine. If you want to have two, let it scale. Later. Now, let me delete and show from the beginning. Because in my manifest, I have given only one. So let's delete. So I will show it with the two. So even though you have one pod, even though you have one pod, even though we have one pod, if my deployment strategy is rolling update, will it delete the first, the old pod, whatever we have only one, or first it will create the new pod, then it will delete the old pod? it will delete the new pod, then it will, it will create the new pod, then it will delete the old pod. Siddharth is asking, sir, do with 25 replicas. If I mention 25, do I have a capacity in my cluster? So we don't have a capacity. Guys, here I am not, again explaining this one, the resources, here. Can I mention the resources, request limits, how much I need for this, how much? Resources, requests, limits. Can I mention that one? How much resources required, how much limits, right? I can mention. Just, I will tell you one use case now. I have given request CPU as 1, memory as maybe 1 GB or 2 GB. But now will this part will be deployed, guys? If I say I am expecting 1 core CPU and 2 GB memory, will this part will be deployed in my current cluster? If I say something like this, why it won't be scheduled? Why it won't be scheduled? Because the scheduler will try to schedule the pods based on the resources available in the nodes. But do I have any node in my cluster with this 2 GB? Except master. Master I have a 4 GB. But again, since master has a taints, will your scheduler will your scheduler consider your master node to deploy that? No. So if I give something like this, limits can be greater than or equals to request. This can be same also, but it cannot be less than. Okay. You can give something like this also. But if I try to apply, first of all, will parts will be created? Part will go to which state? Pod will have some states, guys. Pod will have some states. Pending, running, crash loop backup, right? Something like this. So crash loop backup, if your containers are having issues, containers are not coming up successfully. I mean to say the containers are not running successfully. You have some issue in the code or container, your application. Crash loop backup. If your container, pod will have what, guys? Pod will have a containers, right? So if the containers are not coming up successfully, it will keep restarting the containers. It will keep restarting the containers. So it will go into a crash loop backup if the containers are not coming up successfully. In that case, you need to see what is the problem. Pending. What is pending? Pod is not getting scheduled. Pod is not scheduled due to some issues. Some resources are not available due to resource constraints or configs. Some other resources it is waiting. So how to troubleshoot? This is also very important. How to troubleshoot if the pod is in pending state? How can I know what is the reason? If the pod itself is in pending state, will I able to see the logs? If the pod itself is not scheduled, Will I have a logs for the pods? Very, very important. Troubleshooting, debugging. If the pod is in a pending state, will the pod will have a logs? Pod itself is not created. No. In that case, how can I see? What is the reason? You can I describe my pod? Pod name to see what is the reason. But if my pod is going in crash loop backup or my application is not working, once the container is created, if it is not coming up successfully or there is issue in your container, can I execute kubectl logs pod name? And also if there are multiple containers, if there are multiple containers in that pod, what I can use? I can use one more option called -c container name. If the pod has multiple containers, which container logs you want to see? And also if I want to execute commands on the pods container, can I use this one? kubectl exec. Your command, whatever command you want to execute. If you want to go inside, can I use kubectl exec -it? How to find? Can pod have a duplicate container? What is duplicate container? Basics. Pod will have basics are very, very important. That's why I'm saying focus more on the basics. Don't by heart anything. So pod will have what, guys? Pod will have what? Containers, right? So in pod, what are the pod model types we have? Single container pod, multi-container pods. So in case of multi-container pods, are you going to run same image as two containers? Will you able to run same image as two containers? No. So for your answer, Abdul, will you have a duplicate container? I mean to say, will I have a two containers for the same image in same pod? No. You will not have a two containers for the same image in a same pod. If you really need two containers for your image, then what needs to be done? If you really need two containers for your image, your application, in that case, what needs to be done? You need to have a two pods, two replicas. Guys, basics are very, very important. So now we will see this later, how to find the name of the container. So who is giving the name for a container? Who is giving the name for a container here? We are giving. If you are not remembering this name, if I describe my pod, will I able to know how many containers are there in that pod and the details of that containers? If you don't remember the name, you get the pods, you describe the pods, so that you get the pods and you describe the pod. So the pod will give, if you describe the pod, you will come to know the container details. So now let's focus only on this one, okay? The deployment. Now I don't have a deployment. Let me create with two replicas. Now, if you see, while creating, is it considering the deployment strategy? Since we don't have a deployment, it has created. It's not using the deployment strategy. Now, my application, there is no change in the service. I have not deleted the service. I am able to access my application. Now, let's see the history. kubectl rollout history deployment, my deployment name. Now, how many revisions I have for the deployment? Whatever deployment I created, only one revision. This is the change cause. Now, let me update my image. Now I want to deploy different version of the image. Instead of version 4, I want to deploy something else. Instead of version 4, I want to deploy something else. Or image, different version of the image. Maybe let me take version 5. This is my image which I want to deploy. Now, I'm going to update and my deployment strategy is recreate. Sorry, my deployment strategy is rolling update. Now you observe here on the other side. Again, let me execute that command, apply command. And you see, while I'm doing the update, let's see what is happening. Now, is my application down, guys? If you observe the other side, do you see still one of the old pod is still running? Max unavailable is 1. So one pod went down, but do you see still one more pod is still running? One of the old pod is still running. This one, you see? And these two are the latest pods, latest version. When this will go down, when this will be deleted, this pod, we have given some minimum ready seconds. What is the minimum ready seconds I have given? 60. Now, once that is ready, this part will be deleted. But do you see is my application is still up when I am updating my deployment? So this is rolling update as a deployment strategy. Now the request is going to all those pods, right? kubectl get svc. Okay, it has terminated. Okay, so that is fine. Now you see my application is up when I am doing. If I roll back also, if something is not working as expected, there is some bug, there is some small issue in this latest code, latest container. Can I roll back this deployment to the previous version? Yes. kubectl rollout undo deployment, my deployment name. I am not giving to which revision. I am not giving to which revision I want to go back. So just one revision back. So now while revisioning, while rollback also, you see what is going to happen. Is my application is down while rollback? No. Get svc. I mean to say describe svc. Now do I see three endpoints for my service in the current moment? So one is old. So this is completely ready, but this is also ready. That's why it has been added, right? Now request is served by the new pod and old pod also for some time. Once these new pods are fully ready, that minimum ready seconds, this will be terminated. Because my service is able to find 3 pods with these labels as of now. Service is doing its job, deployment is doing its job. So now it is getting terminated. Now the moment you see it is getting terminated, as of now, how many endpoints I have? The service is pointing to only 2, this latest ones. So this is how the deployment works. So what is the default one also? If I don't mention, as I told, what is the default deployment strategy? Rolling update. But will it wait? If I don't mention this minimum ready seconds, max search and all those things, it will immediately keep deleting the old ones once it is created new ones. So this is rolling update and recreate. How to choose the right deployment in real time? That is based on your use case. That is based on your requirement. That is based on your client requirement, right? So there is a one more approach, guys. It is not a strategy. Do you guys heard about blue-green deployments? Did you guys heard about blue-green deployments? What is blue-green deployment? Sometimes in the interview also they'll ask. So there is a one more approach. It is not a strategy. I can achieve blue-green deployments in a normal virtual machines also. I can, achieve blue-green deployments. I can implement blue-green deployments in a normal virtual machines also. So this is not a strategy. Kubernetes doesn't have a strategy called blue-green, the way we have a rolling update and recreate. It is one approach. So here also I have documented that what is blue-green deployments. So let's understand first, what is the problem with the rolling update? Without downtime, I am able to deploy, but what could be a problem we will face? Why we have other deployment strategy? If you want to really other approaches you have, it is not because of very slow, right? It is not because of very slow. Suppose you are doing a blue gray, that rolling update. Suppose your application, the latest code is having some defect, some bug. Is it going to impact your end users? Because are you stopping the traffic? Are you, stopping the traffic to the latest pods while doing deployments or while doing, rollbacking? The traffic is continue to go to the pods. So if there is really a problem, if there is a really a issue in your latest images, before you realize that there is a issue with the latest image, latest code, before you roll back, will the end users, will the clients also face the issues if I am following that rolling update? Because the end user traffic is floating to the latest pods, latest code. Before you realize that the latest code is not working as expected, before you reverted, end users also will have the issues. End users also will face the issues. So that is one small problem, small issue. If you have a, if you have a very good automation, you have done very good automation. I mean to say you have implemented, automation test cases which will test the functionalities programmatically. Before you deploy, right? If you have executed all the test cases, if everything is working fine as expected, then you can use that approach. Anyone from testing background here? Automation testing. So the testing team can write the test cases. automation test cases using Selenium or some other tools, right? So if they have implemented very good test cases, if your all the test cases has been successful, then only you are doing the deployment, then it will fine. So that's why there is a one, different approaches, different strategies, deployment strategies. There is a blue-green deployment strategy, but it is not like a directly strategy. You can't have something like this deployment strategy as blue-green. It is one kind of a approach. So if you see in the blue-green, so I have an initial version of the deployment. I have an initial version of my pods, and there is a service for that. So in blue-green deployment strategy, the old version of the application, and the new version of the applications are running at the same time. What does it mean? This is one approach. It is not kind of a strategy. You have a old version of the pods, and also you deploy the latest version of the pods. You are not updating the deployment, rather you are creating another deployment. So you have a old parts also running, latest parts also running at the same time. So the end user's request will go to the old pods. You take whatever time you need. I mean to say the testing team take whatever time they want. They can take 2 hours, 3 hours, or half day to test the latest functionality, latest pods. Once they certify that latest parts are working, latest code is working, what we need to do? We need to shift the traffic from the old pods to the latest pod. We have to switch the traffic from old pods to the latest pods in the Kubernetes. We have to switch once the testing team certifies that latest code is working fine. We need to switch the end user traffic to the latest pods. So can I safely terminate old pods now? Can I safely delete everything, the old version of the deployment, old version of the pods? Here, because the testing team has certified that the latest code is working fine, I can safely delete the old deployment. So here we are not updating the deployment. If you want to follow this strategy, you are not updating the deployment. If I update the deployment, what will happen? Will it delete old and will it create new one after the other? But in case of this approach, you have a old deployment and also you are creating a latest deployment. So how to shift the traffic? So who is routing the traffic in Kubernetes? Whether you access inside, whether you access outside, who is shifting the traffic? I mean to say, who is routing the traffic? Service. Now, let's take this one. This is my old deployment. I have given labels as app, Java, web app. I'm giving one more label, something like this, version 1 or version, whatever. I have given a labels for this deployment, this pod. For this pod, I have 2 replicas. In Kubernetes, we created a service. In service, we are giving those labels as what? These 2 labels I can give as selector. Now, the end user traffic is coming via service. Basically, you are accessing via node. Node will route the traffic to the service. Service will route the traffic to the pods. Because from outside, the request is coming something like this: node IP and node port. So request goes to the node. That node can be any node. That node will route the traffic to the service. Service will route the traffic to the respective pods. This is my current release. This is my current release. Now there is a change in my code. I want to follow blue-green approach. I want to follow blue-green approach. In that case, instead of updating your deployment, you are creating a one more deployment with that image. I'll give a different labels. I mean to say something like this. I'm creating another deployment. I'm having something like this. So I've created one more deployment. Old version of the code is also running and the latest code is also running at the same time. But will this service route the traffic to these pods, the new pods? Based on the selectors, if you see, will this service will start sending the traffic to these pods? No, because I have two conditions. App is this, version is this. Here app is matching, but his version is matching for this? No. So even though I have a old code, old deployment, and the latest code, latest deployment in my Kubernetes, will the end user traffic will go to the latest code for now? No. But in the background, our QA team or UAT team, the business analyst or testing team, they will test these parts via different service, via internal service, via different service. So let them take whatever time they want to take. Let them QA, let QA or BA take some time to validate the release, to give a sign off. Once they certifies that this is working fine, we need to switch the traffic. The end user traffic has to be switched from old pods to new pods. How can I do that? I need to switch the traffic. How can I do that? Can I update my service? Can I update my service selectors? Can I update my service by executing kubectl, update command or kubectl apply command? Can I update this service selectors? If I change this service selector from something like this, since I change the service selectors, now will it shift the traffic away from this old code to the new code, old pods to the new pods? Now, can I safely delete this complete deployment without worrying that whether my code works or not? Can I completely delete this deployment, the old deployment? So this is blue-green approach. There is no strategy. It is not a strategy. This is not a strategy, it's an approach. Can I use blue-green? Can I follow blue-green approaches in a normal servers also if I'm not using containers? I'm not using Docker's Kubernetes. Can I do the same thing in normal servers also, normal Tomcat? So there won't be a fraction of seconds, guys. You are just shifting the traffic. Just a fraction of seconds, it will reroute the traffic. You can't realize that your application is down. You will not realize that your application is down. Just a fraction of seconds, right? So here in a normal Linux servers also, will I able to do that? Blue-green deployments. Suppose I have a Tomcat servers or JBoss servers. I have a Tomcat server. Here I deployed this application, old code. So here I deployed also my old code. Now in real time, in front of that there will be load balancer. In load balancer, do you define the routing? I mean to say to which IP, which port it has to go? Normal line, normal servers. Can I implement blue-green approach? Can I do that? Normal Tomcat servers. So the request is going via load balancer. The request is going via load balancer. In the load balancer proxy rules, I have given this servers. The request is going to this one. And there is a new code. Can I create some other servers? Can I deploy the new code in that servers? Now, this will be tested first. Once this is tested successfully, I need to shift the traffic from old application servers to the new application servers. In case of servers, how can I do that? If I go and update my load balancer proxy rules, if I give this server IP address, instead of these two in my proxy rules, will it route the traffic to this one? Right? In a normal Linux servers also, you can implement blue-green approach, not only in the Kubernetes. So if you see very large organizations, like, if you take maybe, like, you take Flipkart as an example, or you take, Uber, Ola as an application. Do you see anytime their applications are down? Do you get any notification saying that they are in a maintenance window, the application is not accessible so and so time? So, but if you see, will the Ola and Uber or Flipkart, will they keep adding the lot of features to their applications? Do you see they're enhancing lot of features in their applications, right? But how they are managing, in the background, how they are rolling their features without making the application down? So they are following some deployment strategies, like a blue-green deployment. But if you see some applications, can two services be attached to new pods? Yes, you can attach, right? You can create a number of services. There is no problem. You create a service with different names, different node port, but you will not create because you have a end user separate service, internally separate service, not the same service. Okay. Now let's understand in the what I was saying. If you see Flipkart, Ola, Uber, they won't have any downtimes. They will be following some deployment strategies. But if you see some of the applications, right, like a SBI, Citibank, or normal applications, do we see notifications like, the application will be down for so and so time, you can't access? They will reroute the traffic. They will stop the traffic at load balancer. They will reroute the traffic to some downtime page, some temporary page. When the request comes to the load balancer, when they are doing the maintenance activity deployments, it will show the temporary page, application is down so and so time. Once they have done the maintenance activity, once they are done with the deployment, they will reroute the traffic. So that is downtime deployments, complete downtimes. So in that case, right, some companies will follow blue green deployment, some companies will follow, complete downtime. That depends on their requirement. But whatever it is, does Kubernetes supports all types of, I mean to say, can we achieve this blue green also in the containers using this concept, whatever we discussed? Yes. But if I follow blue green deployment, do I need more resources? Do I need more capacity in my cluster? Suppose if I don't have enough CPU and enough memory, I can't do the blue green, because at the same time, for some time, do you see old application and latest application also running in the blue green at some point of time, right? So in that case, if I don't have enough CPU, enough resources, if I deploy this one, will it impact the old one also? If I don't have enough CPU, enough resources, so you need more resources for a blue green deployment. Guys, blue green, I am not updating. Vikrant, don't get confused. In blue green, I am not updating my deployment. Am I updating my deployment? Don't get confused. I am, instead of updating that deployment, I am creating another deployment. So this is my old code. This is another code, another deployment or another replica set you can directly create. So troubleshoot, how to troubleshoot OOM memory, out of memory and all. Basically, if you are from a Java development background, do you know what is heap and heap size? JVM. You need to set the heap size for a JVM, right? If you are creating more objects, if you are creating more objects, then that objects are not getting garbage collected, will it throw that OOM, out of memory errors, exceptions? Right? So in that case, do you need to set heap memory based on your requirement for your JVM? So make sure first you allocate, make sure you allocate resources to your container. How can I allocate minimum, maximum? Can I use while creating a pod? While creating a pod, can I use this resources, requests and limits? First, I will allocate how much CPU, memory. If my application requires minimum 2 GB memory, minimum, I mean to say minimum, I need this much. So I can request this much memory. Suppose if this much memory and CPU is not available in the cluster, will the pod will be scheduled? If this much is not available in the cluster in any node, will the pod will be scheduled? No. In that case, you need to have enough capacity in the cluster, enough servers, enough capacity in each server. Then I can apply the limits. Suppose if I say limit as 4 GB, 4 GB, even though there is a lot of load, will it able to go beyond 4 GB? No. Then once you do this, you set the heap size. Anyone from Java background, they can understand. We can set the heap size by passing arguments, that heap size, like xrgs, I don't exactly remember. So let me show the command. I think you guys have set the heap size in the Jenkins, I think, right? Maybe Bhaskar sir might have explained. Heap size. Something like this, guys. So as an environment variable, I can pass something like this. That Java apps, options, something like this. Minimum memory, maximum memory, that heap size, just the parameter. So in your container, you use that environment variable while running the Java process. You pass it as an environment variable. Hope you are clear. Maybe Siddharth, how to set heap size also, right? If it is running out of heap size, you need to take the dump, that heap dump. That is normal process. You get the heap dump of the Java process, by going inside the container, you take the heap dump, whatever commands you use to get the heap dump. If you want to analyze your heap dump, that is how it works, guys, in real time. Okay. Any questions, guys, on the deployment, whatever we discussed in the interviews? Also, they will ask, what is blue-green deployment? Can I achieve blue-green deployments in the Kubernetes? Yes. Okay. Any questions on the deployment? Hope everyone is clear why deployment is recommended way in Kubernetes, because we can roll back, roll out. For rollback, do we need to create a separate pipeline? Not required. In same pipeline, what you can do, you can have one stage. You can have one stage. In that stage, you execute the Selenium test cases. Once you are done with the deployment in the same pipeline, have a Selenium test cases executed on the stage. If the Selenium test cases, that automation test cases is failed, what does it mean? If the automation test cases is failed, with that, we identify that if Selenium test cases is failed, the latest code is not working. If the Selenium test cases is failed, can I have another stage just to execute that kubectl, that rollout command in the pipeline? Yes. So you no need to have a separate pipeline. So Dinakar is asking, I had a question, in large organization like Flipkart, do they create multiple clusters or use single large cluster with many workers? It will be like single large cluster. It will be like single large cluster. So in real time, you see a cluster with, sometimes if it is very large application, you see sometimes cluster with 200 nodes, 300 nodes also you see. Okay, you can see in real time, if it is very big application, you see a Kubernetes cluster with 300 nodes or 100 nodes also. That is depends on how big your application. That is depends on how big your application, how many microservices, how many applications you are deploying. If you take Flipkart, Flipkart is only one application, or Flipkart will have a lot of applications again. End users, right? Customer care, and also suppliers, right? So I can supply products to the end, Flipkart. I may have my own application to work with Flipkart. And again, each application again will have a desktop versions, and also they will have a mobile apps. And also again, each application, will they develop as a monolithic nowadays, or again each application is again developed as a microservices? Again microservices. So based on how big your application, you need that much capacity, nodes, clusters, everything, right? So that depends on project. In one of my previous project, I have just 13 nodes. But now recently I started working on some other very big project. There we are using GKE. What is GKE? Google Kubernetes Engine. If I go for a GKE, do I need to manage the cluster, or it is a managed Kubernetes cluster? Do I need to manage myself this cluster, or it will be managed by Google Cloud? It will be managed by Google Cloud, GCP. So we have approximately 100 nodes in that cluster, production cluster. We have 100 nodes because it's very big application. So that depends on this one. And again, If I go for a managed Kubernetes clusters, if I go for a managed Kubernetes clusters, do I have a control on the masters, the control plane? You don't have a control on the control plane. That control plane will be completely managed by GKE. If I go for a managed Kubernetes. So how they will manage, right? They will have a minimum 3 masters. Minimum 3 masters. In the cloud concept, you have a zones, you have a regions, right? So within the zone, we have a regions. So they will make sure you have a multiple control planes, multiple masters in each region. I mean to say 3 masters minimum. Why they have a 3 masters minimum? Minimum and maximum, they will have a 3 masters only, right? Why 3 masters? Because of the high availability. So again, who will take care this control plane, complete control plane for a managed Kubernetes cluster? You don't have any control. That will be taken care by GCP, Google Cloud. Okay. So I am going to demonstrate EKS later. I am going to cover EKS later. What is EKS? Again, it's a managed Kubernetes cluster. But whatever it is, guys, is Kubernetes concept will change. Whatever I have discussed, pod deployment, replica set, replication controller, whatever Kubernetes concept, it remains same. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Yes, I will explain Helm charts also, maybe 1 or 2 sessions. Helm charts also I will explain what is Helm chart, why do we need Helm chart. 1 or 2 sessions I will cover. Okay. Yes, Srinivas, I will explain. So still, what is stateless, what is stateful? For stateful applications, what is the recommended way to deploy application? Still, I need to cover lot of things. I need to cover what is stateful set, what is PV, PVC, HPA. Kubernetes is not done. Don't relax. Kubernetes may go for another 10 days. All advanced topics still we need to cover. I will explain all these things in the future sessions. Okay. But if you have a time, can you do the Jenkins and Kubernetes integration by following this video? Manually, I am building and deploying so far, but I want you to build and deploy using Jenkins in the Kubernetes. If you have a time, you try this weekend. So there is a detailed video again here. There is a detailed video, Kubernetes and Jenkins integration. Guys, this is very, very important. In the interviews also, if they ask, can you explain your pipeline, your CI/CD flow, your pipeline, your CI/CD flow, your pipeline, your CI/CD flow. You can explain this video, whatever I have done here. Okay. So using Jenkins, we are creating an image, we are pushing the image, and again we are deploying that in the Kubernetes cluster. But here I might be using replica set. If you want to use it as a deployment in the pipeline. And the detailed video is there. And here you configure the kubectl, guys. In this video, there are 2 options. I was using deploy to Kubernetes plugin. I was using deploy to Kubernetes plugin. There is one plugin, Jenkins plugin. Deploy to Kubernetes plugin to deploy in the Kubernetes. But that plugin is not working. That plugin, with the latest Kubernetes, it is not working. So instead of using this plugin, can I configure kubectl in my Jenkins server by installing kubectl, by having that kubeconfig file in the Jenkins server? Can I execute kubectl commands directly from the Jenkins so that it will talk to the API server Kubernetes? If I have a kubectl, just kubectl and kubeconfig configured, yes. So you use the second option. You follow this video. you follow this video, use the second option. That is also explained here in this video. But that plugin option is not working. You use the kubectl option. Any questions, guys, before I start the session for this week? Yeah, lot of people are facing this issue. They are not able to set up the Kubernetes cluster. If you observe last 4-5 days, right, lot of people are saying, sir, I am not able to set up the Kubernetes cluster using kubedium. Lot of people are saying from your batch also, right? So these guys are not able to set up the cluster. They are getting some error. This is because, as I told last time, right, when I started the Kubernetes, I told something called, Kubernetes is going to deprecate Docker. Kubernetes is going to deprecate Docker as a container runtime. So because of that latest versions, latest changes in the Kubernetes, they are not supporting Docker as a container runtime. So for that one, instead of Docker, we can use container D as a container runtime. Okay. So I'm going to make a separate video how to set up Kubernetes cluster using container D, and I'm going to share that. Okay. I'm going to make some separate video and I'm going to share the document also. So I have prepared the document yesterday. I'm going to share this one. What is the meaning of this Docker? Kubernetes is deprecating Docker. So what does it mean? What is the impact we have, right? So yeah, that's what I'm going to make a separate video. Here I have documented. We can still use Docker images. We can still use Docker to build the images. We can still use Docker registries, Docker repositories, but the Kubernetes will not support a Docker as a runtime, but you can still deploy the Docker images on container D. Right? I'm going to make a separate video. I will explain all these topics. I will explain all these topics, right, in that video, and I'll share, guys. Okay. And I'll share the document. This document you can go through. Before I make the video, I will share this document. You can go through. What does it mean? Will Bhaskar sir cover Terraform sessions again? I don't think so. You have a videos. You can follow the videos. There are 4 sessions happened. You can follow the videos. Okay. And if you have any questions, queries, we can check. Okay. We are going to upload videos again. Whatever videos we are planning in YouTube, directly one more video we are planning. We are going to upload in the YouTube and we will let you know. Thank you, guys. That's it for this week. Okay. So next week onwards, I have a class from 7:40. One more class. So maximum I will take till 7:40 from next week onwards. But this week I took more time. So my thing, like my way of teaching is, if I have some time, I'll try to cover more, even though it is not part of our syllabus. If I have some time, I'll try to explain more. That's why this week I took some time. Next week onwards, by 7:40, we will wrap up. Thank you, guys. I'll make a video how to set up the Kubernetes cluster using container D. Then we will see how to deploy. Okay. Whether you are using container D, whether you are using Docker as a container runtime in Kubernetes, again, Kubernetes concept will not change. Whether you are using Docker as a container runtime, whether you are using container D or CRIO, whatever you use, again, Kubernetes concept will not change. Okay. Thank you. I'll continue on Monday.